Good morning. I'm conscious that yesterday I did not break after the witness had concluded answering questions from Mr. McIntosh, as I have previously, to allow legal representatives either to take instruction or, and I think we have one of the legal representatives is attending remotely, to allow for the possibility that legal representatives may wish to either have a moment to consider or more specifically to take instruction. So I shall try and remember to do that today, but I trust no one was inconvenienced yesterday. Now, I understand we're in a position to resume, Mr. Mayor.
We are, my lord. Our first witness this morning is Mr. Kerr Clarkson.
Good morning, Mr. Clarkson, and seeing you, we may actually have met at the Queen Elizabeth because members of the inquiry team some time ago now were given the opportunity of a walk through, and my recollection is that you were responsible for the part of that walk through which took us through the I think the basement water tanks. Right. As you understand, you're now going to be asked questions by Mr. McIntosh, who's sitting opposite you. But first of all, you're prepared to take the affirmation?
Yes, I am.
Right. Sitting where you are, would you repeat these words after me? I solemnly, sincerely, and truly.
I solemnly, sincerely, and truly.
Declare and affirm.
Declare and affirm.
That I will tell the truth.
I will tell the truth.
The whole truth.
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
Thank you, Mr. Clarkson. Now, what I anticipate is that your evidence might take the best part of the morning or the whole of the morning. We will take a break for coffee at about 11:30, but something that's critical. If you want to take a break at any time for any reason, without giving the reason, just give me that indication and we will take a break. So if you feel just, what I would like you to feel is totally in control of the situation. It's your choice.
Thank you.
Mr. McIntosh.
Thank you, my lord. Mr. Clarkson, whether you can give us your full name and occupation.
Kerr Scott Clarkson. I am currently a site manager for operational estates at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital.
And did you produce a written statement for the inquiry?
Yes, I did.
Are you willing to adopt that as part of your evidence?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. Now, what I wanted to do is just to, in a sense, structure your evidence to look initially at the various different jobs you've held within Greater Glasgow Health Board. So, from June 2018 to March 2020, you were an estates manager. What was your responsibilities then?
Initially, because I was new to the NHS, I was asked to manage most of the retained estate buildings to get experience.
This is a phrase that's often used. What is the retained estate building?
It's buildings that are not the adults and children's building.
But it includes the laboratory block?
Includes the labs building, yes.
And the adults and children's buildings and the laboratory building were built by the multiplex-led contractor development?
Yes, they were.
So in a sense, you've got the old Southern General buildings plus the laboratory block?
Yes.
Right. And for those first not quite 2 years, what was your responsibility for that retained estate?
I was looking after general estates management within a number of buildings, particularly buildings related to the University of Glasgow and some non-clinical buildings.
Now, in respect of the water system, were you the authorised person water for that part of the site?
No.
No. Was there an authorised person water for that part of the site at the time?
Yes.
And who was that?
Mel McMillan was appointed as an AP in June 2018 for the entire site.
The entire site. So because we're having lots of witnesses, it's really good to get this clear in our minds. Whilst you were responsible for the retained estate as an estates manager, the authorised person for the whole site at that point, from June 18, was Mel McMillan.
Yes.
And
Mr. McIntosh, you are going quite quickly.
and I'm going to slow down because it's. So you were managing the retained estate from June 18 to March 2020.
Some of the buildings in the retained estate.
Some of the
yes.
buildings. But in March 2020, I understand you took some responsibility for the whole site.
I was promoted to site manager for operational estates.
Now, can you help us, while we're here, what the opposite of operational estates is? Because I heard operational estates talked about,
Uh-huh.
but I also heard about other parts of the estates world.
So can I go back
Yes, of course.
first? Sorry. I was also appointed as an AE in August, amongst a number of AEs in August.
So what's an AE?
Sorry, an AP, sorry, an authorised
AP.
person.
So you were the operational manager for
Some of the buildings in the retained estate, and I also, along with a number of others, went in training to become an authorised person for water.
and when was that?
That was in August 2018.
August 2018.
I did my training.
So from June 18 to August 18, the only authorised person water on the site was Melville McMillan, but after that there were more of you.
There were more, yes, and it was the goal was to try and get more people trained to support Mel as and when necessary.
And when you took over as site manager, what is operational estates?
Operational estates is looking after, we've got corporate estates and operational estates. Operational estates is looking after day-to-day planned and reactive maintenance and looking after the actual compliance with the various SHTMs, health and safety legislation, etc.
So I want to just clear that. So it's planned maintenance and reactive maintenance.
Yes,
And it's compliance with guidance and regulations.
yes.
And what's corporate estates?
Corporate estates encompasses compliance, as in arranging risk assessments into the various SHTMs, and they also have minor works team in there, and they have the fire team as well now, fire officers.
Sorry, question is, what does corporate estates include?
So
I got
corporate estates-
compliance.
Compliance?
Compliance, minor works,
And
and
fire team.
Sorry, minor works and
Fire.
fire. Thank you very much.
So
Mr. Clarkson, I'm trying to note, and it's not an absolute full note, but just as I asked Mr. McIntosh if he could maybe go a little slower, bear in mind that I'm trying to pick up everything you say.
I want to just understand the boundary between operational estates and corporate estates in respect of compliance with guidance and regulations. So I'm going to ask you a question.
So
Well, the question was, who is in charge of seeing that day to day the site is managed in compliance with the guidance?
it will be operational estates.
Who is in charge of making sure that the systems exist for that to happen?
I think it'll be collective.
Collective. So what would corporate estates be doing?
They have dedicated team of managers who specialise in specific topics such as electrical compliance, ventilation compliance, water compliance. So they manage the risk assessment process. They produce monthly reports on performance and risk assessments, AE audits. They arrange the authorising engineer audits as well.
So they do the formal thing.
Yes, they facilitate the process and do the monthly reporting through appropriate governance.
So if we just take an example of an L8 risk assessment, am I right in thinking that it is the corporate side of estates that would order one, but it is the operational side that would go and do the works necessary to comply with its recommendations?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, I wanted to understand how you related to two people in your work, and we started talking about one, so we'll continue with Melville McMillan. So when you arrived on site, he was the only authorised person water.
As far as I can recall, yes.
Once you became the site manager, did he report to you?
Yes.
Right. Before you became the site manager, to whom did you report?
Colin Purdon,
After you became the site manager, to whom did you report?
Ewan Smith.
Ewan Smith, right.
Well, initially, yes, Ewan Smith, because Colin had moved on by then.
And indeed, Colin would have reported to Ewan Smith before you took the job.
No, Colin reported to it was Andy Wilson initially,
Now,
and Colin got Andrew's job.
this may turn out to be a slightly esoteric question, but I'm interested to see how you respond to it. What is, in your mind, the objective for safe management of a water system in a hospital?
To minimise the risk so far as reasonably practicable.
Do go on.
To ensure compliance with the relevant legislation and the relevant SHTMs.
Thank you. Now, I want to ask you about whether certain things existed when you arrived on site. And it might be that you either don't know or that they only existed for part of the site. And please do say, when you arrived on site in June 2018, was there a written scheme that you were aware of?
I became aware of a written scheme that Colin Purdon was writing. I'm not aware of one before that.
Could I show you a document, slightly out of sequence, but I think it might help us, which is in Bundle 18, Volume 2, at page 872. It's document 110. We looked at this yesterday with Mr. Watson. Is this the 111, sorry, which is this the document that was produced, as you understand it, by Colin Purdon, that would have been around when you arrived?
No, that looks like it was a template that was passed.
Well, the reason I say that is if we scroll on to page 877, it seems to have been partly populated. And I wondered if you recognise this document.
I've never seen,
You've never
other
seen
than seeing it yesterday, I haven't seen that document.
Well, we'll ask Colin about that. That's fine. Thank you. So if we could take that off the screen. Was there a water safety plan when you arrived in summer of 2018?
Sorry, just so that I'm keeping up. You asked the question, when you came on site in June 2018, was there a written scheme? You answered that question by saying you became aware of it. Now, do I take it you became aware of it in June 2018 or at some later date?
It was after June 18, but in 2018.
But you can't say when.
I can't remember when. It was,
Thank you. Sorry, Mr. McIntyre.
Might it have been when you were doing the training that year?
possibly, because that was August 2018. I knew Colin had put together and completed the written scheme document.
Well, we will ask him about that. Were you aware of a water safety plan in 2018?
No.
No. Have you subsequently discovered whether there was one at the time?
I don't believe there was.
When do you think the one was available?
It depends on the definition of a water safety plan. The written scheme is in accordance with the requirements of the SHTM. The water safety plan is defined within BS 8680,
Right.
which I think is 2020 that legislation came in, or that guidance came in, because British standards are guidance.
So it may be that there wouldn't be a water safety plan before 2020?
No.
Right. And at the time you arrived on site in 2018, or indeed at the training for being an authorised person of water in August 2018, were you aware of whether there was an authorising engineer appointed?
Yes, there was.
Who was it?
Dennis Kelly.
So Dennis Kelly was in post in 2018?
I recall meeting Dennis in 2018, I believe, carrying out AE audit. Might have been 2019, but
It's around about then.
round about then.
Okay.
Dennis will be able to confirm, or Colin will be able to confirm.
Now, what was the from your point of view, were the differences in managing the water systems in the retained estate and the new building?
I think in the retained estate, if we go to the adults and children's first, being a significantly larger building, with significantly more water outlets.
So the new building was bigger with more water outlets?
And more, yes. And whereby the other buildings were much smaller and had smaller water services.
And might that have been because they didn't have single rooms with en suites?
A combination of both, because obviously the adults and children's building was built with having ensuite rooms,
Yes.
therefore by default having significantly more water outlets.
So the adults and children had more water outlets partly because of the single rooms?
Definitely.
Definitely, right. Now, in the new buildings, adults and children, what was the primary control mechanism for Legionella and Pseudomonas?
At the time in 2018, it would have been the mains filtration.
And what role did temperature have to play in that control?
Temperature, if you get the mains filtration, would prevent any bacteria entering the water system to the hospital greater than 0.02 microns, greater than 0.02 microns.
So you saw that the filtration is the primary control.
But the control is temperature.
Right.
In any building is flow and temperature. Keep the water flowing, keep the temperatures correct.
And what temperatures should you be avoiding?
For cold water, the water should remain below 20. For hot water, within a hospital environment, the water at the furthest away outlet should be 55 degrees, and you should generate that hot water at 60.
Thank you. Now, were there any connections, as far as you're aware, between the retained estate buildings and the new adult and children's building in terms of water?
There is none.
None. Thank you. Now, you may not be able to answer this, and do say if you can't, but from your point of view, knowing what you now know, and we'll discuss what's happened since, were the control mechanisms in the adults and children's building that you've just discussed sufficient for that building?
Based on the document that I co-wrote with Dennis in 2021, looking at the history of water management, which also referred to Jim Leaper's report as well, where Jim Leaper was involved in assisting in writing this report.
So I'm just going to stop you a moment because it's important that we check the document references. Mr. Leaper's report is the report produced after the 2015 DMA Canyon report came to people's awareness.
Yes.
And it takes the form of a review.
Yes.
By Mr. Leaper.
Yes.
Right, thank you.
So, I'd never seen that report, but I was aware of the report in 2020, 21, when we wrote the history.
Right.
I don't think I've actually answered your question.
You haven't yet.
Unfortunately, sorry.
So I can see. So bearing in mind what you've learned, what you've thought about,
Yes.
do you consider that the control mechanisms you've just described of filtration and temperature were sufficient for a hospital of the nature that you end up managing?
I would say that there was evidence of lack of planned maintenance between 2015 and 2018, which is part of the overall risk reduction strategy you have within a hospital.
Yeah, but that didn't answer my question either. So I appreciate that you have described in your statement a series of steps, which we'll go into in a moment, about how you changed the way the system was managed and you increased more maintenance and more scrutiny, more checking, and we'll come to that. But simply looking at that, looking retrospectively with the benefit of hindsight at the building that you, as it were, inherited, do you think the idea that you could run a building like that with only filtration and temperature as the controls, it was sufficient? Or do you not have an opinion?
The guidance, the SHTM guidance primarily talks about filtration and temperature control and flow. But hindsight, probably not.
Okay. Now, what I want to do now is ask you about the DMA Canyon report that came in 2017. This is in.
Can I just reflect on that? Where you're taking your snapshot in 2018?
Yes, I'm asking about Mr. Clarkson's. No, I'm taking his understanding now, looking backwards.
Indeed. But you're asking Mr. Clarkson to look at the situation as it was in 2018.
Yes.
Right. And you're considering the new adults and children building, and you're talking about the fact that there was two mechanisms, temperature control and filtration. We're leaving aside, at least for the moment, as to whether these systems operated as they were intended to operate.
Yes.
You're assuming they were operating as they
I think my
intended
question
to
assumes
operate.
that, yes.
And Mr. Clarkson, looking back, would say that these two mechanisms, assuming they were working, were probably not sufficient in themselves. I mean, have I followed the back and forward, Mr. Clarkson?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
If I could get bundle 6, page 416 up on the screen, which is the 2017-18 DMA Canyon report. Now, when did you first become aware of this report?
So this is the 2017.
Yes, if you look at the bottom of the page, you can see that we have inspection dates in September, October. The gap analysis is January, which of course is before you arrive.
Yes.
So I don't know whether it's when you arrive or later.
It'd have been later. When the 2018 risk assessment was being carried out, which was then published in 2019.
Yes.
My colleague Mel McMillan and I were asked to attend a meet with Colin Purden and Andrew Wilson to look at the 2018 risk assessment actions and to complete those. And Mel McMillan created spreadsheets.
That's a long answer, but it was what I was trying to get to, so let's break it down.
Yeah, but the 2017 risk assessment, the actions were completed on Smartsheet by Colin Purden and Andrew Wilson. So I think they were getting done in parallel.
Yeah, I think we can get all that, but we need to do it in bits.
Okay.
So the first question is when you first become aware of this one.
Would have been late 2018.
Late 2018. And at that point, you are working on the next one.
Yes, we are.
And you just, not discover is the wrong word, you learn about it because you're in a meeting with Mel McMillan and Colin Purden in late 2018, at which point you're discussing the next one.
Yes.
And you're telling us that the outcomes from this one were dealt with by some other people.
Colin and Andy.
Colin and Andy. So Colin Purden.
They were filling in because I reviewed Smartsheet as part
of just get the names because we've got to get the names. So Colin Purden and Andy who?
Wilson.
Andy Wilson. So they used a Smartsheet system.
Yes.
And this was able, and this is a computerized system?
It's a software package which is very similar to Excel, but it allows more management of actions, if you want.
So, for example, if they went and found something that's described in this report that required action, and they did the action, they would record it in a Smartsheet, and you would notice.
Yes, because it's logged the dates and times of when those actions were completed in my home.
So would it, in a sense, be a sort of summary of all that, to say that in sometime in the autumn of 18, when you're on site, you're relatively new, not only are you learning about the new one that's to come, but you're also noticing that actions have been taken about the previous one?
Yes.
Right. Now, there's a document that I want to just understand more, that I'm having difficulty nailing down what it is. It's in bundle 8, page 86. So this is a relatively long document in landscape format that the inquiry has been provided with, entitled Review of Recommendations and Actions Arising from the Reports of Water Systems at QEH and RHC Risk Assessment dated September 17. Now, the problem with it is it doesn't have a date on it. And so I'm suspecting it's talking about the document that's dated, September 17, except the 2017 paper is not dated September 2017. So have you seen this before? We can look at the next few pages if it would help.
I believe I have seen it.
Do you want to just jump forward a couple more pages? Does this ring any bells? Let's go back one page to 87.
Yes, I have seen that document.
So can you help us about when it would have been created?
I think that was created in middle to late 2018.
So if we go back one page. Thank you. So would that be at the time you've just been talking about, when you are aware of the Smart Suite work being done?
Yes.
By Andy and Colin?
Yes.
Right. Now, the next thing I just want to make sure that we connect the dots together is bundle 8, page 150. This is Mr. Leaper's report, I think. Do you recognise it, or can we move on a page and you'll see it's got quite an odd format, that one.
Yeah, I haven't seen the report before until I seen it in the bundle, but I'm aware the report was carried out when we did the water history.
Thank you.
Jim helped. Jim basically extracted some of the detail which we included in that report.
Okay. Can I just speak to my colleague? Now, I want to ask you about something in your statement. It's page 105 of the hearing bundle. So the bottom of the page, you start off with, I've been asked to explain what on my appointment AP I was told about the state of the water system at the QEUH RHC and by whom. And I'm asked as if it was expected, and if not, why not? And then you described your role. I'm going to go over the page, top of the next page. Here we are. And you described the various people. And you've described meetings with Colin Purden, Andy Wilson, Melvin Millen about the actions required from the 2018 risk assessment. That's the 2018-19 risk assessment from DMA Canyon. I want to be clear about that. And Colin and Andy asked Mel to focus on those actions.
Yes.
And those are the ones that we've just been talking about, that you were aware of being dealt with.
That previous report?
Yes.
No.
That's the one afterwards.
Yes, that one there, I think, is in relation to the previous risk assessment. Mel was asked to work on the 2018 risk assessment.
Yes, so the one that's been discussed in the third line on this page, Mel is being asked to work on the 2018-2019 DMA Canyon L8 risk assessment.
That's correct.
Thank you. Now, I want to just ask a little bit about the final sentence, which you said, personally, it was concerning that a large number of issues still appeared. I want to just check what you mean by that. What do you mean by that?
What I meant by that is, given there was a pre-occupation risk assessment carried out in 2015, and I believe those actions should have been completed as far as reasonably practicable before handover. To get to 2018 and still have so many actions outstanding was concerning.
Right, that's what I wanted to say, because I wasn't clear whether that was a reference to still appeared to be outstanding or still appeared now as a new thing. And this is outstanding as the word that's missing.
Outstanding from 2015.
Fine, thank you. Right. If we can take that off the screen, please. There's some discussion in various reports about the Zutec system.
Yes.
And also in your statement, you refer to a CAFM system.
Yes.
Are they the same or are they different?
They are completely different.
And what's the purpose of the Zutec system?
Zutec has the operation and maintenance manuals from the builder. It's an external system which has all of the details from the construction including all the drawings, schematics.
So it's almost a static system,
a static system, yes.
a bit like an owner's manual.
Yes.
Right. Whereas CAFM is a dynamic system.
A dynamic system which computer-aided facilities management software is used globally to manage planned maintenance and reactive maintenance, where you can define your PPM activities that then automatically issues them to either service providers or to in-house staff. And the reactive works can be raised by internal customers, and they can raise those reactive jobs, and they're then issued by our supervisors to EDAs.
So we heard yesterday from Mr. Watson that in his eyes, there hadn't been sufficient action on planned preventive maintenance in the years following the site handover. If that had been done as he anticipated it would have been done, that would have been recorded in the CAFM system and built into it effectively as a plan.
Yes. I think it was one of the things that we included in the water history document from Jim Leaper comment that there didn't appear to be what is called the soft landings. The word I use is a modern word for it, soft landings from handover, where you get your defined PPM schedules.
So, effectively, there doesn't appear to have been at handover a PPM schedule set up for the building.
Yes, so that you could appropriately resource that as well.
Now, have you ever been involved in starting the operation of a new hospital?
No.
No, well, I won't ask you about how practical that is, but that's what you're saying. It would be on the CAFM then,
yes,
if it was, right. Now, one of the concepts that we are trying to understand in the inquiry is the difference between commissioning and validation.
Mm-hmm.
Do you understand there to be a difference, or are they the same thing in your mind?
I know it's used a lot in ventilation.
Validation.
Commissioning and validation, whereby you commission to whatever the standard was set at, or what the design was, and validation is to check that it meets that standard.
So in the world of ventilation, the commissioning process is to check you built it as you're supposed to have built it.
Yes.
And the validation checks you've done the check.
Yes, then continually validate.
Right. Can I invite you to correct me? I have had the occasion to look at SHTM 0301, and I think I've got an understanding, which maybe you may wish to correct me, that commissioning is something you do with possibly discrete items of equipment, plant, possibly as you go along, or maybe not long after that. Whereas validation is something carried out at the end of the process to make sure that all the individual parts work together to meet contractual specification, or if you're checking against the SHTM guidance. Now, have I got that right, or am I wrong about that?
You have that right.
Right, okay.
Yes, validation is what you do at the end to ensure that what you asked for,
The whole system works together.
was what was delivered.
Now that's ventilation.
Yes.
So if we switch over to water,
Water.
does that concept translate, or is it different?
It's probably not used a lot, I think, within water. You commission systems, but then what you're testing is for Legionella bacteria or TVCs prior to handover.
Now, this may be just be
validate the water system's safe or wholesome.
Again, correct me if I've got this wrong. Could it be that in a ventilation world there isn't the same density of regulations around that there are for Legionella, Pseudomonas, E. coli in the water world, and therefore you probably don't have the validation because you have to do all these other risk assessments? Is that a reasonable inference, or?
It probably is the case, yes, that given all of the health and safety legislation that sits behind with L8 HSG 274, which is the health and safety guidance, there's probably a lot more from statute.
So that means that if you're looking at the water system well, we'll come back to ventilation. The water system through the eyes of Zutec, you should find the commissioning data in there,
Yes,
but there won't be validation data in the traditional sense of ventilation.
there should, as far as I am aware, that should be, the validation should have been part of the,
For water,
no, sorry, for ventilation.
if you stay in water,
For water, no.
you should just find the commissioning
You
stuff.
find the commissioning.
What?
There should also be the,
Right. And in relation to a water system, does my distinction between commissioning, you're saying there's not a validation step,
not in water.
because what you're concerned with is output, in other words, the quality of the water.
Yes,
But in the course of constructing a water system, you will, as I've described before, in relation to a particular item of plant, commission it in the sense of saying if this
It's
item is
operational, it meets-
doing what it's intended to. Thank you. I'm sorry to be so pedestrian, but I want to make sure that I'm following it.
So that prompts a series of questions. So when you looked at the Zutec system as a user, was there commissioning data about the water system, in whole or in part?
I don't know. To be honest, I don't know.
You don't know. Okay.
But I'm aware there was the sampling was in there as well.
Well, I was going to come to that.
Yes.
So there's commissioning data for water. You don't know.
Yes.
When you come to, just because you're here, ventilation and the Zutec system, was there commissioning data for ventilation in the Zutec system?
I haven't checked the whether it was there or
Right.
not.
And presumably, therefore, you wouldn't have checked whether there's validation information. No. Okay. In the Zutec system, should you be able to find drawings for effectively everything?
Yes.
Were there drawings effectively for everything?
There seems to be drawings missing.
And what sort of percentage, approximately, over the years, have you noticed?
Probably a small percentage.
Small percentage, under 10%, sorry.
Probably, yeah.
Probably, okay.
But I'm not looking at everything.
No, I realise that.
So
I suppose I'm asking the question because I'm assuming that of occasion you require to look for drawings,
yes.
and most of the time you find them, but sometimes you don't.
Sometimes you don't. Sometimes it'll be a blank page.
Right. Now, when it comes to water testing results from before occupation or handover, are those the results you would be finding in Zutec?
I don't recall actually seeing them in Zutec. I remember that Alcontrol requested to do sampling, I think.
Alcontrol. And so where would you have got those results from?
There were spreadsheets in the estate's drives as part of commissioning.
So,
Sort of validation, rather.
if the impression that you're giving us is that some of this results was in Zutec, some of it was in spreadsheets, and a small amount wasn't there at all, is that how it's supposed to be, or is it problematic in any way?
I'm starting to doubt myself of whether there is the data in Zutec for the.
Well, we'll ask some other people. That's fine.
Yes.
If you can't remember, that's the reality.
I am aware there was the Alcontrol spreadsheets which were created, because I've looked at them as part of the overall history.
Yeah.
Which indicated there was a number of out of specifications prior to handover.
Now, I wanted to turn to a series of events that you I think you have some involvement in. I appreciate you may not be the main mover in many of these, and some of them will have happened just before you arrived. And so don't hesitate to tell me whether you don't know. There seems to be some suggestion that in respect of the Horn Optitherm taps,
Yes.
there should have been some sort of scheduled maintenance in place when the hospital opened. Is that something you've heard of?
Yes.
And was it in place when the hospital opened?
There was a lack of planned maintenance in the Horn Optitherms.
Sorry, I just missed that. A lack of
planned maintenance. And
Right.
the only reason I know is because I wrote about it.
Right. So you investigated it effectively?
Yes.
And this planned maintenance would have involved flushing them at a regular or appropriate interval and cleaning them?
The flushing of them is part of the daily cleaning routine carried out by either facilities colleagues or clinical staff. as part of the guidance. Over and above that, there's a requirement within to do TMT maintenance.
The TMT maintenance is the...
Thermal mixing cartridge, which is inside the tap.
Yes, because we've heard evidence that the advantage of the Horn-Optitherm taps is that the mixing occurs in the tap, not behind in the wall.
Yes, because you have a TMT is a thermal mixing tap. You have a TMV, which is a thermal mixing valve. The valve sits behind a collection of taps. Then you end up potentially having, if somebody keeps using the one tap, and I say a selection of 3, theoretically the other 2 might not be getting used. So that little bit of pipe can become a dead leg. So that's why you fit TMTs rather than TMVs.
But these particular TMTs required a maintenance regime.
All TMTs require maintenance.
But for these ones, the maintenance regime, when was it actually started?
There was some started in 2019, doing 6 monthlies, which was a SLAM test on them.
A what test?
SLAM test. Basically, it's to check that the safety device works. The purpose of the TMT cartridge.
So every time you use a jargon, I'm going to stop you and ask you what it means.
My apologies.
What does SLAM stand for?
It's basically to ensure that.
Come on, what are the letters? It means something.
No, it's just basically, it just means that in the event that you lose the cold water to a tap,
Yes.
the tap shuts itself down. SLAM shut, basically.
It's a safety system.
It's a safety device. It's so to prevent scalding.
So in 2019, they started maintaining the taps.
Yes.
With a particular focus on the SLAM function.
Yes.
Are you aware of a meeting in 2014, as well before you got involved, about these taps, when others will tell us exactly what happened, but there seems to have been a suggestion that there required to be some form of particular maintenance regime for these taps. Is that something you've heard of?
Yes, retrospectively, yes.
So that particular maintenance regime, when did that start?
It's, as far as I'm aware, it's the same maintenance.
The same maintenance. So it's 2019 in your memory?
Yes.
Right, thank you. Now, I want to just turn to the chlorine dioxide system.
My fault for not keeping up. So in relation to the thermal mixing taps,
Yes.
the planned maintenance began in 2019.
I think, looking back at history, I think there was some TMTs getting maintained before that, but not them all.
Not them all. Is there any particular person who was involved in doing that maintenance we should be asking?
I would suggest Ian Powry.
Well, we're speaking to him on Thursday, so we can add that to the list. Right. I want to turn to the chlorine dioxide system. Now, if I understand it correctly, it would have been being installed soon after you arrived at the hospital.
Yes.
Did you have any involvement in its installation?
Myself and Mel McMillan facilitated a couple of night shifts so that the pipework could be modified to incorporate the chlorine dioxide plant.
From your point of view, how did the chlorine dioxide system's arrival change the way you manage the water system?
It offers a secondary, you've got your filtration, you've got your temperature control, you've got your moving water. Chlorine dioxide is an effective biocide against any bacteria within a water system and is widely used globally.
And from the point of view of as a system operator, does it have any downsides for the physical part of the system?
If the chlorine dioxide levels, chlorine dioxide is a balance because it can end up corroding components within a water system. It reduces the lifespan of
what sort of components are at risk, or what materials?
metal.
Metal. Any particular metals?
I think stainless. No, it shouldn't affect stainless steel. It will affect other metals.
Well, if you don't know, we'll ask someone else. From your point of view as of an operator, does this issue with the materials cause you to change the way you do your planned preventive maintenance? Are you on the lookout for such faults, or is it just it takes so long, it's not a problem yet?
It's not a problem yet. It reduces the life of your overall system,
Right.
because it can, depending on the level, start to have an effect.
One thing that's been raised with us is the an issue with managing water systems that use chlorine dioxide, is that you have to keep the concentration of the chlorine dioxide in all parts of the system above a certain level.
Yes.
Does that how does that work with dead legs or with very long pipes that aren't well used, depending on your point of view?
The chlorine dioxide that Queen Elizabeth goes directly with it into the main tanks.
And this is in the basement plant room?
Yes. There are remote stations in various plant rooms throughout the hospital which are monitoring the chlorine dioxide levels in those areas.
So these would be the plant rooms where, for example, the chlorifiers are?
Yes.
Right.
Additionally, as part of the 2018-19 project, they added chlorine dioxide into the hot water systems as well.
Right.
That is a secondary backup, because chlorine dioxide burns off naturally within hot water.
So it's more not effective is the wrong word, it lasts longer in cold water?
Yes.
Right.
Basically, what that means is that if you lost your temperature control within your hot water system, the chlorine dioxide levels would balance out, and you would have, for short term.
So if you had a hot water return that dropped below 55 in the hot water system, you would still have chlorine dioxide there?
Yes.
You hope?
As a secondary means of risk reduction.
So in the cold water system, if you have effectively quite long pipes, is there any issue getting the chlorine dioxide concentration up high enough at the ends of pipes?
Not if the water's constantly moving.
If the taps are in use, effectively?
Yes. If the taps are in use, that shouldn't be a problem.
But if they're not in use and they're not flushed, then it becomes an issue?
Eventually, the chlorine dioxide burns off as well in the cold system.
Right. And we heard some evidence from Mr. Watson about how he tests chlorine dioxide levels in water as part of his sampling system.
So it's done. DMA currently carry out the chlorine dioxide monitoring in accordance with HSG 274 at all the sentinel points, which is all your furthest away outlets.
Your what outlets?
Your furthest away outlets.
Furthest outlets. Just I want to make sure that we catch that.
And also, as David, as you say, indicated, for the sampling.
Now, in this hospital, it's been suggested by other people that the design of the system creates some very long distances from the plant room where the tanks are. Have you had any difficulties keeping chlorine dioxide levels up at the sentinel points of the distance?
No.
And how would you know that?
Because of the ongoing sampling regime of chlorine dioxide.
And that's been running since 2019 as well?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Right. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the decant of the Schiehallion unit towards 6A in the adult hospital, which we understand happens in September 2018.
Yes.
So you'd have only been in job for 3 months at this point.
3 months.
And in your statement, I won't go to it, but it's paragraph 126, you describe your involvement in some sampling that was done and some tap changes.
That was in the later project in 2A.
Ah, right. In that case, I will go to paragraph 126 of your statement, please. So what you're talking about here in paragraph 126 is on page 129 of the hearing bundle. So halfway through this paragraph, it goes, my role in this aspect of the report was working along the others.
Yes, this was the construction project in 2A.
So that would have been when?
That was 21 into 22.
Ah, right. Okay, that's fine. Now, are you aware, and if you're not, say so, of whether when the construction project in 2A, 2B had been completed, there was a HI scribe done for the complete works?
Is this the initial decant works?
No, the
or
final set of works.
It was managed, the whole area was shut off by capital planning and isolated in accordance with the CDM regulations.
So it came in as effectively a new build.
Yes.
Do you feel that, is HI scribe a mechanism for risk assessing new builds such as this, as far as you're aware?
No, it's HAI scribe documents is for making changes, relatively small changes to live environments.
So it wouldn't be used for a big job like the refit of Shannon?
No, not I am aware of.
Do you want to
Yeah.
explore that with
So let's discuss your level of expertise.
To some extent, if it was within the total, within 2A, 2B is within a larger building, then there's probably an overarching scribe to minimise the risk to patients that are going to be in adjacent wards.
Can I just break this down into sections? I think it's important. So let's start with you and your knowledge. As you explained, you arrived in June 2018, having not previously worked in the NHS. So what training or experience have you had with HI Scribe since then?
A lot, because it got to the point that I was writing a lot of scribes on behalf of the Estates Department because I was good at writing the scribes documents.
So your understanding of HI Scribe is that it's not used for new build?
No. And I've not had any experience, because I don't deal with new builds, I wouldn't have that experience, but I've written hundreds of scribe documents in relation to changes within existing buildings.
Right, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to check this over the break, because I wasn't planning to do this, but I want to just check with one of my colleagues who's probably watching about whether we show you HI Scribe. But before we do with that is that you've obviously written a lot of HI Scribes.
Yes.
In terms of the practical day-to-day work of the Estates Department in the hospital, what's the impact on your work of requiring to do HI Scribes for work?
It's significant work to write the document along with our infection control colleagues, and we work very well together in producing these documents. They're there to minimise the risk, obviously, to patients, but the time it can take to achieve the scribe is significant.
And does that time vary depending actually how intrusive your maintenance intervention is?
Yes.
I think it's been discussed, suggesting that it might have been necessary to remove panels to access pipework.
Yes.
And is an HI Scribe for that much bigger than an HI Scribe for flushing a tap, say?
So there wouldn't be an HI scribe for flushing a tap, but yes, there is an HI scribe for doing the TNT maintenance. In high-risk areas, in fact, in all areas, it requires removal of IPS panels, which is your wall panels, to get access to the isolation valves.
So presumably the worry is that there's something behind the panel that's a problem.
Yes, and you can't do that in high-risk areas with the patient in the room. You have to remove the patient from the room, then put in physical protection for that room. You have to, protect all the services. So a job for TNT maintenance, an annual TNT can take 1 hour to carry out, turns into a 3-4 hour job. That room is then out of use from a clinical perspective for a significant amount of time.
I mean, you don't design taps, but you use them. Is it possible to imagine a way of installing taps that wouldn't have this high impact consequences for maintenance?
Yes, either taps with isolation valves this side of the IPS panel, so it wouldn't be necessary to get that, or build it into a unit behind so that you can open the door.
Yes.
And it's a sealed unit, therefore you're not going to get anything that's going to impact the ventilation environment.
You almost build a cabinet behind it.
Cabinet, yes. In older buildings, I'm aware, you used to have channels running up where you would have access to services, but that takes up a significant amount of space. and that way you could get in between rooms.
It's almost about hollow walls.
Hollow wall.
Hollow walls. So from your point of view, this critique is of design.
Yes.
And whilst I hesitate to call it bureaucracy because it's a process of patient protection, it's certainly paperwork.
So it's a lot of paperwork. We understand the reasons why practically all of the work that's done has to be done under a scribe in patient rooms.
And you certainly can't go and just pop into the patient room, test the water, test the temperature, and step out.
You can go in and test the water.
Yeah.
Because that's no different from somebody using it, whether clinical or patients or families. But if you're doing invasive works, then it's requiring a scribe.
Now, what I'll do is I might come back after the coffee break to the question of HI scribes in new build or refits of large wards. But we'll move on to. Could we go to your back to your statement to paragraph 19, please? Which is on page 108. Now, the reason I went to this is simply because you provided, in the context of some Legionella results. Now, the timing has thrown me here in the way that we've asked the questions and you've answered them. Are you able to help us? The timing is November 18.
Yes.
March 19. Now,
Yes.
The reason I wanted to ask is, firstly, are these the only positives that were then?
As far as I can recall, yes, that was the only Legionella positives that we had in 2018 and 2019.
Right. Now, we've already asked Mr. Watson about what that means, so that's really helpful just to clarify what's going on here. Would these have been reported to an infection control doctor?
These sample results would have came from the GRI labs.
Yes.
So microbiology would be made aware of that.
Yes, I wanted to ask you a series of questions about how you report
Yes.
results. So let's just start from the basics and get to this via the basics.
So
Before we do that, let's go.
all right.
Clarkson. Mr. Watson yesterday explained for his samples how he would do it. He would be told to sample certain taps and flushing points. He would write a methodology. He would take the samples. He would deliver the samples to the lab. The lab would give him the results, and he would report the results with the out of specification numbers back to microbiology.
Yes.
And if it was a GGC lab, it would get into microbiology systems anyway. But it wouldn't be his job at DMA Canyon to report it onwards to infection control doctors. It would just be back to the system. Now, for when the work's been done not involving DMA Canyon, once the water has gone to the lab, the GRI lab, what do you get back in a state?
For clarity, DMA took those samples.
So this would have been the DMA system.
Yes. So they're following DMA, the only people that have been taking water sampling since 2018 onwards.
Okay, so let's imagine that in a moment we can discuss your water sampling you've been doing. But let's imagine in 2021 you are doing the water sampling that's required by the water safety plan, and DMA are actually doing the work.
Yes.
And you're in a state. Do you get told the results?
DMA send on to a select number of people within microbiology, H control in the States, the various sample results.
And then do you have your own system for telling other people in microbiology?
Yes. So what happens is whenever we get the spreadsheets through, we analyse those results. Then we create incident reports for any out of specifications. We then inform whether, when we review the results, if I see any potential issues with temperature, then or chlorine dioxide being low
Right.
in an outlet, I would then inform our infection control colleagues to review clinical practices, which includes flushing.
Yeah.
And also we would look at reviewing the use of those outlets.
So there's a lot in there. So out of specification microbiology results, you would report to infection control.
It goes full circle in essence. So they have the results anyway from the lab,
Yes.
but they then send that on to DMA. DMA then send the reports on to estates, microbiology, certain people in infection control.
So it gets to microbiology two different ways.
Yes.
From the lab and from you.
Yes, but we also then report if there are actions needed and done, and I need the support from our infection control colleagues to review clinical practices, including flushing, I will email them saying, here's a current out of specification.
So this system, is that the modern system now, or?
That's the modern system, probably from 2021.
Before that, what was the system as far as you're aware?
Those results there.
Possibly just so that I'm keeping up, Mr. Clarkson. You've explained that the results of testing, some which will be within specification, some which may be out of specification, will come to you in estates. You're assuming that the same information has been distributed at that point in time to microbiology, infection prevention and control.
DMA send on the same
Right.
spreadsheet to our
Now,
list.
what I'm interested in is, what do you do then? You've got the results. I think you've said you check them for any out of specification.
So yes, we check them every week for any out of specifications.
Right. So let's suppose you've identified a certain number out of specification. What do you do then?
We create incident reports to the team. We have 2 dedicated technicians within the estates department who manage day-to-day activities of water management. They work for Mel McMillan and the supervisor, and they carry out certain actions on those outlets. So that's from the estate's perspective. DMA will automatically add these to their own flushing register. And that way we know there's a constant flushing going on to give a baseline. I will then email microbiology and infection control if they require to carry out certain actions.
Right. Now you're emailing them to advise them of what estates have independently decided to do.
No, that there's been an out of specification on a particular outlet, and for them to investigate as well.
Right, okay. Okay, so estates do not necessarily take any action independently, but you report to microbiology.
Yes.
It's just, I want to make sure.
We work collectively together now as a team.
So one of the things that you talked about was out of specification, and I wanted just to make sure I was looking at the understanding what that is. So is that the document in the water safety plan that sets the specifications for each types of test?
Yes.
Right, okay.
And who writes that?
Initially, the limits. So you've got the limits for Legionella and Pseudomonas, which is defined by guidance.
They are, yes.
Out with that, there is no any extra guidance. In 2018 or maybe early 2019, Dr. Inkster and Ian Powrie agreed set limits for other bacteria, molds, yeasts, etc., which there is no extant guidance. That forms the basis of our water safety plan to this day.
And that's that table all the way through?
Yes.
And that's the one, when you say to me, it's out of specification, that's the one you mean?
Yes.
And when you decide to email microbiology colleagues, that's the specification you mean?
Yeah, and DMA use that same process as well.
Right.
So they work to the same standards, hence why it's easy to see that information.
What I want to do then is, I think I'm just going to find the document and make sure you're looking at the right thing. This is bundle 27. No, it's not. Give me a second. Document 7. No, it's not. I'll come back to that. Here we are, sorry, it's the written scheme. Bundle 27, Volume 1, Document 19, page 276. And so is that the latest version as far as you're aware of the written scheme?
It is the current version, however, we're about to move to version K imminently.
We've only put in, I think, version 1 and version J in our bundles. Right. If we jump forward to page 396, is this the table of which you've just been talking?
Yes.
Right. Thank you. Now, if we could take it off the screen, please. This is a question which is I'm asking everybody, and I'm intrigued to see what the answer is. What do you understand the word contaminated to mean in the context of water, in domestic hot and cold water system?
Contaminated water. Scottish Water provide wholesome water to a building. It cannot contain E. coli coliform, which is zero limits for that. Therefore, if it does contain E. coli coliform, it is therefore not wholesome.
Yes.
Contamination of a water system would be when something that shouldn't be in water enters a water system.
And would that be chemicals?
Could be chemicals or anything, pests, from
Dead rats?
Yes, as we can
Towels,
see from recent cases.
What about microorganisms? Can they be a presence of microorganisms at an appropriate level?
Yes.
Can that be described as contaminated?
It's colonisation it's colonisation of a water system by opportunistic
Bacteria or fungi.
Yes.
Yeah. So is there some sort of alternative? It's contaminated means one thing and colonised means a similar thing but for a different thing.
Yes.
Right. Now, what I want to do now is talk about, move on to the water safety group, Lord. So we obviously haven't yet come to looking at minutes from the board water safety group, but since you're here and you're an authorised person, from what your point of view is, what's the responsibility and purpose of a water safety group?
The board water safety group overarching is to manage the water. So you've got the board water safety group, which manages the water compliance across the whole of Greater Glasgow and Clyde. You then have sector water group meetings, which then report into that board water safety group meeting.
And so in Greater Glasgow and Clyde, it's divided up into North Sector, South Sector, Clyde Sector.
South,
yes. And isn't there a regional sector as well? Yeah. So there's 4 sectors of it.
4 sectors.
And this hospital is in South Sector.
Correct.
In the time you've been at Greater Glasgow and Clyde Health Board, has there always been sector water safety groups as well?
As far as I recall, yes.
Right. Would there have been a sector water safety group in 2018?
I think so. I haven't seen the information to be able to say yes.
Well, we'll explore that with somebody else. The reason I wanted to ask that is, when did you start attending the board level water safety group?
I think it was 2020. There was some occasions I went there for experience. I started to attend them now as part of, I guess, training. I now chair them in the meetings.
So your roles have changed.
Yes, but it's part of a training rather than.
Could I ask you to look at a bundle 11, page 144, which is document 45, and it's appears to be a water safety group meeting from September 2021.
Yes.
Now, is this roughly when you were first attending them?
Yes.
I'm going to ask a slightly series of unfair questions. I'm going to try and ask what everyone's doing there. If you don't know what people are doing there, do say.
Okay.
So obviously Mr. Cox is chairing them.
Yes.
And then you have yourself as an estates manager.
Yes.
Now, of course, at that point, you're manager of one site in one sector.
Yes. So I'm there at that meeting in the absence of Ewan Smith, who is my manager.
Got it. You're standing in him.
Standing in.
And then Dennis Kelly is the authorising engineer.
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher is head of corporate estates, and you've explained the difference between corporate and operational already. And Mr. Purden is speaking on behalf of Clyde sector.
Yes.
Presumably, the actual head of estates couldn't come, or they've arranged it that way between themselves. But he was there for Clyde.
Well, that is the main role within Clyde. There were assistant heads.
No, that's fine. It's not actually an issue. I'm just trying to work out what everyone's doing.
So Colin was in essence the charge of that sector.
Right, and then Mr. Jordan. Is he within the world of corporate estates or something else?
No, he's within. I believe he's within the health and safety department.
Right. Okay. And then we have Pamela Yandes, who's a nurse infection control consultant, and then Mr. Fulton. He's bidding for his sectors.
Yes.
Professor Leonard, who's the lead ICD at that point, if I remember correctly. Mr. Green comes from the same world as Mr. Jordan.
I think so.
Yeah. Mr. Kennedy, Dr. Kennedy is the consultant. We will speak to him in due course. Mark Riddle, presumably he's your ultimate boss.
He now is the assistant director of estates working for Tom Steele.
But back then he was the head of the operations site.
Yes. Back then, yes.
So effectively he's the opposite number of Mr. Gallagher.
Yes, he is.
Yes. And then we have Mr. Cairns, and I don't think I need to ask you about what he does. And then Mr. Hunter, how does he relate to you? Because you're also in South Sector.
He is the director of the facilities department, which manages all of the cleaning aspects within
The cleaning aspect.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Right. Well, we'll just look at the people who didn't make it, as it were. Mr. Smith is who you're standing in for.
Yes.
Right. Now, I wonder if we can go to page 146. And the third from the bottom, it says storage tanks. I'm assuming this is a typographical error in the second line. It's metal that's deteriorating.
Yes.
What is this metal in the storage tanks about which you are speaking at this meeting?
This is the corrosion of the steel rod bars.
This is the horizontal tie rods that we've seen a photograph where there is
Yes.
a checkered pattern.
Yes.
Sorry, my fault entirely. I've just kind of running behind you, Mr. Mayor.
So it's on page 146, my lord.
So we're still, I mean, this is,
The water safety group from the
right,
9th
this
of
is a
September.
minute of the meeting.
Yes, my lord. 9th
Right.
September.
I'm now with you. Thank you.
Yesterday we saw some photographs, I won't take you to them, of the tanks in, not the raw side, but the post-filter side of the tanks. And we saw pictures of them. So this is you reporting that there's some issue with these rods deteriorating. Are they still there or have they been replaced?
They're still there.
Still there. Now, these are on the post-filter side.
Yes.
So what can you do to prevent these flakes getting into the rest of the system?
There are strainers within the outlets, and so they wouldn't, because they're heavier in water, they're going to sit in the bottom of the tank. But there's also strainers within outlets which would...
Outlets from the tank.
Outlets from the taps, which would stop particles.
So are these the flow strainers?
No, they're internal strainers within the actual outlet.
Right.
So before the actual tap outlet.
And are these strainers things that can be accessed without taking off panels and...
Some taps, yes. Other taps, no.
Right. So we're back to the problem of the HI scribes and the workload.
Yes.
Okay. Right. Now I want to talk to you now about the South Sector Water Safety Group. Now, if we could take that away, I'm just... When did you start chairing it?
The South Sector one?
Yes.
I don't chair the South Sector. It's Ewan Smith chairs it.
Oh, sorry. I'm doing Mr. Smith a disservice there.
Ewan's the RP.
Right. He's the responsible person.
Yes.
Well, we'll come back to what what we did actually at the meetings later on after the break. When did you start attending the water technical group?
I only attended a couple of water technical group meetings.
And they would have been in 2018 or thereabouts?
No, I think 2020, 21. I may have attended the odd technical group meeting.
Well, what we'll do is we'll come back to them in a bit after the break, because I've got some questions to ask about those. I want to just check in. I think you've already answered this, but we've heard evidence of 4 DMA L8 risk assessment reports carried out. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So the first one predates you, and we've discussed that already. The second one in 1718 is the one that you were checking the implementation on the Smart Suite system soon after you arrived.
Yeah, and Colin and Andy had, but I became aware retrospectively that Colin and Andy were they're obviously doing that at the same time as Mel was concentrating on doing the 2018, 2019.
So you're doing the 2018-19 one with Mel?
Yes.
And then the most recent one is the 2023-24 one?
Correct.
Now, what I just want to understand is, why was there a gap between 2019 and 2023-24 for one being done?
The risk assessments were managed through our compliance department. They raised a purchase order in 2021. And they're required to carry out risk assessments in all of the buildings on the campus. So the decision was made to carry out the risk assessments in the retained estate buildings first, because they hadn't been done since 2016.
Right. So why wasn't it done in the new buildings as well at the same time?
Because of the amount of time it takes to actually carry out these. They were getting done by DMA, so the resources that are available and the amount of time it takes to carry these out.
So is this your resources as a hospital or DMA's resources?
DMA's resources. They were the service provider requested to carry out the risk assessments.
I didn't specifically phrase the question. That's not the way he seemed to see it, but you think it's his resources, not the health board's resources?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Now,
so just I followed that question. Why the period of time between 2019 and 2022, lack of resources on the part of DMA Canyon?
Oh, wouldn't necessarily just focus on lack of resources. It's also the time it takes. It took over a year to actually do one building at a time, because the amount of work it's required to actually achieve it. Right. It's unreasonable to expect to have significant resources to actually achieve it.
Fair point. Thank you.
Right, well, I want to just take a moment before we have the break to start looking at the authorising engineer's reports. And particularly, I want to look at one which I'm going to, hopefully my colleague won't be too surprised when I ask him to go somewhere completely different, which is Bundle 18, Volume 2, page 909. So this should be the 2018 report. I'm going to ask you some general questions about these, and then, Mr. Clarkson, after the coffee break, we'll just go through them methodically once individually. So I just wanted to check that you understand these, and we can discuss them with you. So this one here bears to be an authorising engineer's audit, compliance audit for the hospital in July 2018 by Dennis Kelly. And you're not the staff member being interviewed. The ones I asked you to look at have you as the staff member being interviewed. But could you just explain to His Lordship, what's your role when these audits are being done as the staff member being interviewed? And we'll look at your ones after the break.
What we do is we work together with Dennis, be able to provide the information. He's carrying out an audit on the management system and compliance with L8, looking at plan maintenance records. So we have to facilitate that assessment so that he can complete that report.
And so you're providing him effective information?
Yes.
And by the way it's described as interviewed, I suspect it's somewhat of a question and answer session in some sense.
Yes, it's not any different from any other type of audit. If you've got an auditor and they're looking for information, they're looking for evidence. Show me, demonstrate to me.
Because the one thing that I thought was a little bit different from an auditor is that Mr. Kelly attends the water safety group.
Yes.
And I suppose most auditors don't attend the audit committees of, well, they do attend audit committees of companies. So it's like that, is it? They're out there on the audit committee.
Dennis obviously attends, as you say, the board water safety group meetings. He is the authorising engineer for the board on various areas. And so he's got an in-depth knowledge of obviously water systems.
And so how much preparation do you require to do before one of these interviews?
Over the years, it's been getting easier and easier because we found other methods of being able to demonstrate information. Whereby, when I first started, a lot of the information was in physical files.
Right.
And therefore, you had to then collate all that information, make sure the admin aspects had been done and the paper records had been put into the files. So you then have to take all the files to Dennis. Dennis would then have to look through the files, and if things were missing, you'd have to go and look for those and try and find and put them in. As the years have progressed to actually now, we have, in the last few months, implemented within Teams, and I'm a big advocate of Teams, BS 8680 compliant file structure.
So this is the same guidance to produce the water safety plan?
Yes. So we have a structure in place there now. So even up till then, we had went to Teams. All the information was in Teams, so the auditor could sit there and access all that information, sitting literally behind me in the office. Yes. On the big screen. Then if requesting information, I think Dennis has said in the future audits, it used to take him 3 or 4 days to carry out an audit, whereas now it can be done in just less than a day.
Right. So it's administratively a lot easier.
Yes.
Right, we'll talk about the substance, but this might be a good place to break for the morning, Lord. And then we pick up the substance in it.
As I said, Mr. Clarkson, we usually take a break about now. Can I ask you to be back for 11:45?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Mr. McIntosh.
Before we turn to the authorising engineers audits, as discussed by Mr. Clarkson, I need just to get some more details about the history that you wrote.
Yes.
For the simple reason that at this precise moment, my colleagues in the back office can't find it. So can I just get from you when you wrote it?
2021.
And what form does it take?
A Word document.
Roughly how long?
80 pages.
Would it be possible for you to send us a copy after you've got back to the office and we can match it? I'm sure it's in our system somewhere, but there's an awful lot of documents in our system, and I'm keen to make sure we have the copy. Is there anything in it that you consider not to be accurate anymore?
We took a significant amount of time between myself and Dennis, along with Jim Leeper, to go through it with others inputting it as well.
And then Jim Leeper took some of the words to put into his paper.
No, we took some of his words.
He
gave us some of his words to put into our paper.
So if we see a cross read between him and you, they come from him.
They come from him.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Now, if we could look at Bundle 20, page 2078, which I hope is the authorising engineer report for 2021. Yes. Now, you are marked down with Mel as the staff interviewed. I'm assuming this is back in the day with the paper copies.
Yes.
Yes. And then the risk levels are assessed. I wonder if you can help me out with an observation I've had, and I can take and show you the DMA Canyon comparisons. But in DMA Canyon's risk assessment levels, the first and second both require immediate action. And it is Dennis's second one doesn't require remedial action. Is this something that people have noticed, or is a?
I think different people use different risks. Generally, we try and achieve them all as quickly as possible.
Yes. Well, I want to talk to you about the journey you've been on. So,
Yes.
if we go on to the next page, we see at the bottom, it narrates there are 24 recommendations in this audit. Does that ring a bell with you?
Yes.
Yeah, and then previously there have been 43 in the 2021.
Yep.
Now, over the next 4 years, does the number of recommendations from Mr. Kelly reduce?
Yes.
And what is the current number?
I think it was 9 for 2024, of which all were completed within a matter of weeks.
Right. Now, from your point of view as a operator of this system, what was the amount of work that it took to get you from 43 to what is now 0?
It's a significant amount of work given the resources we have and the breadth of the job that we do in the States, that you sometimes that you have to prioritise other areas within the campus, particularly with what you would call ageing infrastructure in the older buildings. But the intention is always to try and complete these as we want.
And in terms of the available resource,
Yes.
you obviously weren't around in 15, but you've written your history. Are you able to comment on the amount of staff and other resource you have now compared to back then?
It's probably better than it was then. We are using a lot of outsourced service providers such as DMA and others for other aspects of compliance.
And if you just,
water.
I mean, this may not be the whole picture, but I'll break it down and we can see whether I've got all the bits at the end. In terms of full-time equivalent staff, are you the same number of staff back in 15 or more?
More.
More.
But I can't remember the numbers we've got now because we've added a few more in recently.
In terms of the budget you manage, has that gone up or gone down?
It's went up. The actual spend budget hasn't went up, but the spends went up significantly.
That doesn't make sense to me. I have to break that down. So the spend budget hasn't gone up.
The actual budget that you're given to spend against hasn't went up, but the actual spend that you're spending, so you're basically spending more than you were given.
So you're overspending.
Overspending.
And
that doesn't mean that we're overspending. It could mean that the budget wasn't right.
Of course, yes. But in terms of the number that was put in the budget line,
yes,
you're spending more than that.
Yes.
And have you attempted to have your budget increased?
I don't manage the budget directly, but I think there's been discussions about at a higher level about the need for budgets to be higher.
Who is the first person in your sort of chain of command above you who manages the budget?
Ewan Smith is my direct manager.
You may have to ask him. Right. Now, I want to go to the 2024 report, which I'm hoping is in bundle 27, volume 1. It is. It's at page 252. And then after this page, which is the general site description, do we have the executive summary on the next page?
Should be.
And there are 7 recommendations in this one. If we could go on to the next page, it may not matter in the overall scheme of things, but looking at the levels of risk found, what does task completion, which is down as a high risk, amount to?
We'd have to see the detail of what tasks weren't getting completed, which will be further down in the report.
Would there be a section for that?
Yes, there is.
Well, let's
If
go
we down to there's the recommendations there.
So we'll go on through that,
So
so that it would be a question set on,
It's sorry, it's summarised on the first page there. Yeah,
go back.
it's number 7.
So page 252, number 7, yes. So this was basically something to do with a non-completion of a task to do with non-flow through expansion vessels.
Yes, this is this is making reference to the 2 vessels that are in the basement tank room that are accumulator vessels
Yes,
that can be converted to flow through.
yes.
However, at the time of the audit, we couldn't. When we sat down with the audit, basically we get these converted to be flushable late 2023. So when Dennis asked to see the evidence from that, we had to request the evidence for DMA, because DMA do the flushing of these now. So they've been already converted.
So before this conversion, they weren't flushable.
They aren't flushable.
Now they are flushable.
Now they are flushable.
And these are the cold water accumulator tanks,
Yes.
which are sometimes called expansion vessels.
Yes.
But they're not the same as the hot water expansion vessels, which are in the calorifier systems, and they've been replaced some time ago.
Yes. They can be passed. They can be converted to flow through, because of the way they operate. The ones in the basement, because they're called accumulator vessels, because they need a head of pressure to be able to, as the pumps kick in to pump water up 12 stories, the pump will kick back. So the accumulator vessel acts as a damper,
Right.
to take away that pressure release.
Now, if we could go through to bundle 27, volume 1, page, well, we were there before, it's the written scheme. So it's document 19, yes. That's page 276. I don't want to go through this in detail because we can obviously read it. But from your point of view as one of the people who reviews it, how much has it changed in those various revisions that we've got to Division J?
The first changes that I made was to, I think, version C, and I started to incorporate the other preventative maintenance activities that were getting carried out but wasn't detailed in the written scheme. That included the mains filtration maintenance by a company called Veolia, who are the manufacturers of that equipment.
Veolia.
Yep. They do 6 monthly maintenance.
So you'd added in to version C.
Version C, aspects of planned maintenance that were in place but hadn't been added to the document.
And you're making it effectively a wider, more comprehensive document.
Yes, making it a more comprehensive document so that people can understand all of the risk reduction activities that were getting carried out. So included that, included all the chlorine dioxide management that was getting done by ScotMass. They do monthly maintenance of the units.
And that's the bit units in the basin that add in the chlorine dioxide.
Yes, and the various, which are called alpha units and bravo units, which are secondary units throughout the hospital.
So you're saying that at version C, it widened?
It widened the scope of what was included within the management. Steadily making minor changes. Then we get to version J. Version J is the first step to a BS 8680 water safety plan.
Now, is that a system of compliance where you can be audited against the standard?
So theoretically, yes, you could. Yes, if auditors wish to go down that route, it just means that the structure of your document is nationally recognised, so it's easier for somebody to audit then, because the
Yes, because one of the things that you've touched on, and I asked you a question I think I must have misunderstood, is that a written scheme and a water safety plan often overlap in their utility.
Yes, a water safety plan. The written scheme is generally dealing with the biological side of water management, the immediate use of the water and the risk of the water. The water safety plan expands that to include chemical, radiological and physical.
So the written scheme came out of SHTMO 301 Part B.
Yes.
And the water safety came out of, I can't now remember the number, the BS 8680 in 2020.
Yes.
And you're trying now to achieve that standard?
We have version K is about to be approved. It should have been approved already, but with everybody's holidays and everything, it couldn't go through the sector meeting. But in effect, it's the same people that attend these meetings will be doing.
So this gets approved by your South Sector Water Safety Group?
Yes, and that's already been checked through by another AE as well.
Another authorising engineer?
We worked with Daniel Pitcher, who's an authorising engineer, and we converted our water written scheme into a water safety plan.
So let's just recap this. Since you arrived, you've merged the water safety written scheme into the water safety plan.
Now, yes.
Version C, you started adding in the various bits of work that were done by subcontractors.
Yes.
You're trying to change the format so it matches the modern standard of the BS
8680, yeah.
8680. And you're now getting the new version audited by another authorised engineer.
No, we wanted an independent review of our compliance, so we requested Daniel Pitcher to have a look at that, and he compared us to the British standard. So this is ahead of the British standard. In fact, the water safety plan was included within the updated SHTM guidance. It is included within HTM guidance in England, but I believe it will be included within.
So you're trying to meet get ahead of the standards.
Ahead of the standard,
okay.
Because we had the significant building blocks already in place. When version J was an interim solution to when Daniel came in a couple of months ago, then came back 6 weeks later, got to the point in between that interim time that we realised we could actually convert this to a water safety plan within that timescale.
Okay.
Because it's just really reorganising the information that you already have.
Does that mean that everything about managing this campus is in one document?
Yes. And that covers all aspects of under water safety plan. You have all aspects of water management, including scald risk, drowning risk, COSH assessments on chemicals and water.
Okay, right.
So
I want to ask you.
It's widening it into also the use of water rather than the water in itself.
So I wanted to ask you a couple of questions that arose from your evidence this morning about the water safety plan. When we looked at the page we discussed the reporting of microbiology results. You mentioned, I think, there was a sort of a select list of microbiologists who received. Who is on that list at the moment?
I believe Abjit Bal's a microbiologist in infection control. Receives them. I think Linda Bagrade receives them. She's a microbiologist.
Do you have a list back at the office?
Yes.
Could you send us that list?
Yes.
Is the list in the water safety plan now?
No, because all we do is we put in there that's actually quite a good enhancement we could include, but yes, it's just the departments that are currently in there
So,
rather than the name.
but obviously, it's been suggested that infection control and microbiology has at times had a slightly convoluted management structure by other people. So, how do you choose the people on that list? Or who chooses the people on that list?
It's a collective decision
Of
made
whom?
by, if I remember a couple of years ago, I sent an email to infection control microbiology saying who wishes to receive the information from DMA,
Right.
the results.
But presumably you had to send a list to that request to certain people and they are the ones who responded.
Yes.
So if I was to start thinking, well, I'll go and ask Sandra Devine or someone like that, and she'll know the answer, it's more a collective situation, you think?
Yes. More a collective than.
So there's not actually someone telling you this is the list?
No.
No. But could you send us the latest list, please? That'd be really helpful. And what we'll do is we will, at this point, when you mention those names, we'll just paste in, we'll take a note of the fact that all the actual names are, and we'll use that when I make my written submissions to his lordship. So I've got a note of who they are.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Right. What we'll do now is let's talk about the delicate topic of the point of use filters. Now, these have obviously been fitted before you arrived.
Some of them had been fitted before I arrived, and I think it continued during 2018.
And you discussed in your statement the process of them being removed starting in 2020, but then stopping.
Yes.
And it's now being considered again in 2024.
That's correct.
And so what I wanted to do was just to get some details on this. And I think there's something in a water technical group minute from the 22nd of April, 21, bundle 10, page 204. So this is at page, item 5, it's actually on page 205. Down the bottom.
Yep.
So this seems to be the first bit. It's being reported that there was a removal program in mid 2020
Yes.
for non-Schahalian filters.
Yes.
So where would that have been?
That is within the Children's Hospital.
For other bits of the Children's Hospital.
Yes.
And around 50% were removed, but the labs were overwhelmed. I'm assuming they're overwhelmed to do with the pandemic rather than anything to do with this.
I think it was, when it means that it's overwhelmed with samples.
From the poof removals?
Yes, because what we're having to do, what was agreed at the time, was that you would take the filter off, sample behind it, put a new filter on,
Yes.
wait for the results. Then we need to get 3 not detected in a row.
Yes.
Then the filter, so you went through 3 filters by then, over 3 weeks. New filters.
So you would take the old filter off,
Yes.
sample the water behind the filter,
Yes.
put a new filter on,
Yes.
come back a week later, do that again, do it again.
Do it again.
And if you've got 3 negatives, you could take the filter off.
Yes. Then the information, the water samples were sent by DMA to GRI labs to process. So I'm assuming that means there that it was overwhelmed, the amount of
Oh, right. So it's
sampling.
overwhelmed with this exercise, not with something else. Right,
Yes,
that's helpful.
yes, I think this is the overwhelmed with samples.
Now, and you're thinking of now doing it again, but you're not there yet, or where are you on removal?
We've identified, it's become a bit protracted, the process. However, we've identified within, when I say we, together with microbiology and infection control, have identified areas in the Queen Elizabeth and RHC where point of use filters could be removed, which are general wards.
So at the moment, all the wards in the tower have filters.
No, there's a certain proportion of them, not all of them. The decision is made by others in 2018 that, based on risk assessment, to fit point use filters in certain areas.
Okay. So the ones that are still there in the tower, you're thinking of removing those.
Select ones that are not in high risk areas.
Okay. But that process isn't complete yet.
No, because of the difficulty and lack of guidance for mass removal of filters. Because if you went through that same process of what we went through in the children's hospital there, of taking sampling every single outlet. So every single outlet, if you have 28 rooms, say there's two wards that are general wards in the adults hospital at the minute. They were high risk, been converted back to general.
Sorry, just to recap, because you went a bit fast there. You're saying there's 2 wards in the adult hospital that have point of use filters.
Yes.
Right, carry on, please.
There's more wards
More
than that,
wards.
but these are 2 wards that are definitely general wards that can be removed from.
Got it.
So if you've got 28 bedrooms, then you've got a shower outlet, a clinical wash hand basin, and a sink in the ensuite. You need to take 2 samples for cold and mixed from both sinks, and you need to take a sample from the shower. So that's 5 samples for one room. Then if you do that 28 rooms, you would repeat that 28 times. That's a lot of samples going to the labs, then you would repeat that again and again and again.
For 3 weeks?
Yes. So it can become quite extensive. So what we're looking at collectively as a group is, what are the options? Do we need to go down that route? Because this is removal of filters where there are no out of specifications. The guidance is different if you've got an out of specification. If somebody fits a filter because they've had Legionella there, then you have to go through that sample.
So just to recap, if we just take as an example, I know it's been refitted since then, but Ward 2A as was.
Yes.
Before you arrived, it had arguably out of specification samples, and the filters were fitted.
Yes.
To remove those filters, I know they've been removed completely because it's a new unit, but to remove those filters would have required this 3-week process.
Yes.
But what you're talking about is wards in the hospital where your current testing regime is not showing anything out of specification.
Correct.
And did it ever in those locations?
I don't know the answer to that.
But it might have done, but
it may have done in the past, yes. Long
So
time ago.
your question is, what do I do where in recent years it's all fine?
It's all fine.
How do I remove the filters?
How do you remove filters? It's easy to fit them. And this isn't just unique to the Queen Elizabeth. This is a general issue of, once you've fitted these, unless you fitted them as a result of having an out of specification, then the guidance is clear that you have to go through that process, and understandable, of sample, test, sample, test, sample, test. We might have to go down that route, but the options are open at the minute, and we're looking at, risk assessing.
So who are the people involved in that exercise to make sure I ask the right questions to the right people on the way past?
It's being led by one of my colleagues in the compliance department who works for Alan Gallagher.
Right, and in terms of infection control and microbiologists, who's the input to that?
I think Linda Baggrade was involved in those discussions as well.
Okay, thank you. Right, now, I want, just while we're dealing with taps, let's go back to taps, because I might ask a couple of other questions. You discussed looking at the maintenance of taps, the Hall Optotherm taps, and making sure they were being maintained properly, and you explained that had started in 2019. Are you able to tell us when it started in Ward 6A?
6A would have had point use filters fitted.
But it would still have a Hall Optotherm tap with a point use filter on it.
Yes.
So when did the flushing regime and the cleaning regime, rather, not the flushing, when did the cleaning regime start for the Hall Optotherm taps in Ward 6A?
The cleaning regime is part of the national cleaning standard for facilities to clean the taps. But if you're talking about the actual tap.
Yes, I'm talking about, remember when we were talking about the Hall Optotherm taps, I asked you about whether in 2014 there'd been a meeting about purchasing the taps.
Yes.
And there'd been suggestion they should have a regular cleaning regime. And you gave evidence, if I understood you correctly, that regular cleaning regime started in the hospital in 2019.
It's for 6 monthly.
6 monthly. Are you able to tell us when it started in Ward 6A?
I don't have the details for that.
Do those records exist?
I would have to check.
Could you obtain for us the confirmation of the date that started in 6A, please? Because I think there's a question that I think needs an answer.
Yes.
Then there's the...
So I can go back to the TMTs?
Yes, do.
Regards to TMT maintenance, the TMT maintenance in 2019, there were 6 monthlies that were getting carried out. In 2020, there wasn't any carried out because there was a tug group, which is a procurement term for carrying out a tender board-wide.
Right.
And plus COVID was happening then as well. In 2021, you were only given permission at board level to get the 6 monthlies, TMTs, maintenance carried out, and DMA started carrying out those.
So there was some maintenance in 19.
Some maintenance 19.
Then there's a gap.
A gap. Then, when I say the 6 months, 6 monthlies is the SLAM test, the safety check,
yes,
not the clean.
Ah, right. So if we're focusing, as we are, on the recommendation that there be a regular clean,
yes,
that's actually not until DMA start doing it in 2021.
2019, I think DMA was carrying them out. I can't recall where they carried them out. It wasn't done in any 2020. 2021, DMA were given permission to carry out the minor maintenance, we've got to call it, the SLAM test. In 2022, myself and I escalated in March 2021 to senior management. The annuals weren't getting carried out on TMTs.
Right.
And the decision was made in 2022, regardless, to go ahead and start doing annual maintenance.
I think what I'm going to do, Mr. Clarkson, because this is quite important, and I don't want to make this a memory test, is what we'll do after this hearing is we'll send you a little questionnaire, and we'll get that nailed down, because a number of people are interested in this timing. And so we'll leave that for now, because I think there are records you've probably got, and you can tell us the results, and that will have the advantage of being clear and precise. So I'll find out later from you when these various types of maintenance of the whole terms took place and in which wards, and that'll be really helpful.
Okay.
Okay. Now, let us move on to the topic of... Actually, given time, I'm not going to do that. I want to just ask a question, which I asked you to look at an IMT minute. I'm not going to go to it now, but I just want to understand what you do when you end up at an IMT as an estates operations manager.
We work as part of a team to carry out an investigation. So if there's a potential that it could be related to water, or it is a bacteria that survives in water, our colleagues in infection control will ask us to carry out tests on taps.
So you're there effectively to provide that input?
Yes, and even general condition of rooms as well. If it's not related necessarily to water or ventilation, but it could be as part of the overall estates aspect.
And so when a person turns up at an IMT from estates, it would normally be someone from operations side of estates?
Yes.
And in this hospital, it would often now be you or Melville Millen?
But in relation to water, it would be generally at the level I'm at. So for myself, it would be 10 for water, Hugh Brown for ventilation, and Ewan Smith as well.
Now,
for electrical.
I'd like to go to the water safety group minutes for 2022 onwards. They're in bundle 27, volume 1, at page 444. Now, the reason I want to go to your minutes is because at the end of these minutes, we have a set that runs from here until 2020, August of 2023. I want to really discuss a question about out of specification or the limited number of out of specification results and the reliance that can be placed upon it. And it occurred to me that a good place to go to have this conversation would be, well, first page 482. So it appears it's reported into your minutes the results of water testing that are within parameter or nothing is detected.
Yes.
And I want to just check that these specifications go back to that table in the water safety plan that we've looked at.
That's correct.
And then if we scroll down to the bottom of this report onto page, in fact, we jump forward to page page 448. So is this how you report your water safety specification results to the water safety group?
It's one of many bits of information, but yes.
Now, so when you or anybody else is saying on behalf of the health board that there's the number of out of specification samples is low, these are the sort of levels you're talking about?
Yes.
Right. So I'm sure you appreciate that there are some people who are skeptical at times about the health board's compliance with these sort of standards, albeit there aren't any standards for most of these microorganisms. What would you say to someone who is anxious or concerned or skeptical about the suggestion from you and Mr. Kelly's audits and the DMA Canyon report that the water system is now much better managed?
I would say that I appreciate where it came from, and that the risk reduction measures that have been implemented indicate, what we've achieved, and it's from various parties as well. It's not just the health board saying that. You've got independent reviews. However, I would also say that by continuing to still use point-and-use filters in high-risk areas, which is a consideration as part of the SHTM requirement for high-risk areas for patients, to fit them as part of your overall risk reduction strategy.
So how would you respond to the point of view that this isn't widely enough known or understood, and therefore people have a lack of trust in the resolution of these problems?
So how do we get that information?
So where does this information go to?
This goes through governance.
So it goes up to the water safety group.
Goes up to the board water safety group. It goes to the number of the infection control meetings as well.
And in theory, eventually it reaches the board.
Could theoretically go all the way to the top.
Okay. Now,
if you're leaving that, Ms. Magdosh, I think I'd probably like to go back to Mr. Clarkson and sort of get his answer to your question. What would you say to the anxious or skeptical at dictation speed?
Yes.
So, really just asking you to repeat what you've just said. The question is, what would you say to someone who's anxious or skeptical about the management of the water system?
Say
I
that
just take dictation.
Given the risk reduction strategies that have been implemented, which has been independently assessed through risk assessment and audits, together with sample results history going back to 2018, is an indication of the how effective the system now is.
from your point of view as somebody who's been operationally managing this system since 2020, but been involved in it since 2018 to some degree, when did it really begin to make a difference, what was being done?
I would say that the people that were there in 2018 laid the foundations.
Mm-hmm.
And without those foundations, we couldn't have made the significant progress that we have made.
But in terms of not having too many out of specification results, when did that change happen?
Probably from 2020 onwards. And it started, certainly in the last couple of years, the amount of out of specifications has reduced significantly.
Thank you. Now, what I want to do now is to ask you, I've already asked you about HI Scribe, so I won't go back to them, but it occurred to me, and you didn't mention this in your statement, but one of the things I've noticed learning about this issue is the use of S-bars.
Yes.
From your point of view as an estates operation manager, are S-bars a useful mechanism to raise issues and concerns?
They can be, but they shouldn't be used for replacement of other processes that aren't necessarily working correctly.
Could you give an example by the sort of way they might be used and that's what, as a replacement that's...
Well, if we go back to the issue with the tanks in the basement,
Yes.
it was raised, as we know, the executive management in 2021. We raised it in a system called EAMS in 2022, which is a system to allow capital planning to consider capital projects and to prioritise. Then in 2023, we had to raise an S-bar again to try and get this project moving to replace the tanks. So
To replace the tanks?
to replace the tanks.
It seems a little early to replace the tanks in a building that's less than only a decade old.
Yes, because it's the wrong type of metal was used initially.
But sticking with S-bars for a moment. So you see the downside of S-bars is when they have to be used because something else didn't work.
Yes. And that's the same with all walks of life where people put in new processes hoping it's better than a process that isn't necessarily working correctly. But
Yes.
the S-bar process itself is effective.
It just sometimes you wish it didn't have to be used.
Yes.
I'm now going to just sort of catch up various little bits and pieces that don't make an awful lot of sense, but we'll get there in the end. You mentioned broken blinds in your statement.
Yes.
These are the internal blinds between two glass panels.
Yes.
It's been suggested to me that when these are repaired, they require, in a positive pressure ventilated room, they require to be pressure tested. Is that correct?
If you have to create negative pressure as part of the scribe requirements. Then, if you're carrying out any work in specific type of rooms, you have to create negative pressure.
So
And
if
that's
you
without
would,
the patient in the room.
so it doesn't. If you were fitting a replacement blind in a window for a room that has any particular any pressurization regime, you would have to test the window.
We have to create negative pressure by measuring the ventilation to ensure that the ventilation is extracting in the room.
But if you've taken the window out and put it back in, would you have to test the room?
If it's a high risk ward, then I think the room would have to be validated.
And that's ventilation validation.
Ventilation validation.
Now, as far as you're aware, since you've been the operation manager for the new build, when blinds have been replaced in positive pressure ventilated lobby rooms, have all the windows been properly pressure tested and validated when they've been repaired?
I don't know. I can't answer that.
Would you be able to find out? Is that how the system works?
I would have to see what rooms those blinds have been replaced in, if they have any.
The reason I thought it was quite an interesting question is not so much because of the individual topic of do you need to do that? Obviously, you've told us you do need to do that. But can the record keeping system in the hospital satisfy an inquiring mind that that sort of thing is being done every time? Is it capable of doing that?
We'd have to check to see if rooms that are positively pressurised have had blinds replaced.
And in theory, there should be a record showing they've been validated when that's done.
If there's a requirement to revalidate it, then there should be.
Right.
But we need to see if, and it'd be detailed on Scribe.
It should be detailed.
Yes.
Right. Okay, let's talk about the Ward 6A kitchen in October 2019. So that's bundle 12, page 998. Now, the reason I'm showing you this email is not because you received it, because I know that you did, because there are some pictures attached.
Yes.
And also, I think you discuss the leak. Is this the same leak?
Yes, it wasn't a leak as such.
What was it?
The hot water boiler, it sits on the wall to provide boiling hot water for drinking. Has a vent pipe at the bottom of it, and the vent pipe's purpose is to stop it overpressurising. So this can happen through overuse or quick use, and it fills up quickly. The air expands in it, the water has to come out through the vent pipe, and it'll dribble along. And generally, what you do is you put that to drain.
Yes.
Through over either a tin dish, which is like a cup,
Yeah.
and an air gap, or you can run it, if it's close enough to the sink, you can run it directly into the sink. In this case, the boiler, water, when it was coming out of the vent pipe, was dribbling along the sink line and going down where the tap was. When it went below the tap, it was landing on what appeared to be sawdust for potential the original build behind the kitchen carcass.
We might have some pictures of it. So I'm going to ask you to look at some pictures, which is Bundle 27, Volume 2, page 17. I mean, maybe you don't remember, but and then there's also the next page.
I remember.
And the page after.
I did my own report on this as well.
Right. So, is this the same leak we're talking about?
Yes.
And the reason it seems important is, what's the source of that sawdust and other material?
It looked as though, and obviously I can't evidence that kitchen unit has been there from the original build, so the sawdust potentially was from when the kitchen was built.
Because if the kitchen had been replaced or more work had been done, presumably you'd know about
behind it.
Oh, you'd have cleaned behind it.
Yes.
Right.
You'd have noticed that.
Now,
you can see the raw sawdust along the skirting there.
Yes. If we go back one, I think we can see it clearer. No, not the other way. There we are. And the first picture?
Yes, so there's the dry sawdust there, and what was on the floor was wet sawdust. The minute that was cleaned up through one of our cleaning service providers, the floor was clean.
Can you actually help us understand something unrelated to it? On the left-hand side, is that one of these panels that you remove, but viewed from the back?
Yes, it is. It's one of those. That's the kitchen carcass unit viewed from the back.
So when you're talking about removing panels and requiring an HI scribe,
it's not those.
It's not those. That's a shame. Well, I'm really good. Right. Okay. Now, if you take that away, please, I want to ask you a little question about the chilled water system. So, the inquiry understands that there was some form of failure in the chilled water system in April 2020. Are you aware of that? To do with corrosion?
There is ongoing corrosion issues within the chilled water system, yes.
What's the nature of the issue?
There appears to be, I'm not the expert in this, but there appears to be a number of contributing factors, either internal corrosion within the pipework or insulation around the pipework not being fitted correctly, allowing condensation to build up and cause for corrosion from the outside in.
And the pipes fail occasionally?
These are thin wall carbon steel pipes, so they're thin at the best of times.
Yes.
And therefore they just take small amount of corrosion.
Because the amount of water in this system compared to the domestic system is quite low.
Yes, but it's still, given the size of the hospital, the circuits are significantly big.
And is this the same system that chills the chilled beams?
Yes.
Right. There's obviously been some discussion about the potential for leaks at the connector point between the chilled water system and the chilled beams. Mm-hmm. Is that something you've been aware of?
Back in before 6A, or 6A was before it was occupied, I believe there was a number of connections to the chilled beams that were basically push fittings, so that if you lose your control on the hot, the chilled connections were fine. On the hot connections to the chill beams, basically if you lose your heating, they basically expand and leak.
So if the pipe's cool because you turn the heat goes away,
they open up.
They'll leak.
They'll leak.
Right.
But they were replaced.
So that's not related to the corrosion system, as well.
No, that's completely separate.
Completely separate. Okay. And then Do you had any involvement with investigating dust or condensation on chill beam units?
It's been, I believe back in when Darryl Connor was in charge of ventilation, I think he asked me to accompany Dr. Engster to look at some issues with chill beams.
What did you find when you went?
I was basically, Dr. Engster I was basically facilitating access, and it was more so that swabs could be taken.
Does this mean you're the guy holding the ladder, effectively?
In effect, yes.
Did you get up to the chill beams and have a look?
I believe I looked at some of them and there was some level of dust, but that dust is from the environment, not from the ventilation.
I appreciate that. How is the chill beam system designed to prevent condensation building up on it? Or if you want the right person to ask, we should ask Darryl. We'll do that.
I'm aware of what was done by Darryl.
Well, let's talk to Darryl about that. We'll do that.
Yes.
And then I want to turn finally to the delicate topic of pigeons, which you've addressed in paragraph 87 of your statement. And you mentioned that you arranged for bird netting to be added to courtyard areas. Why was it necessary to add netting to courtyard areas?
I think it was recognised by the group. I don't know who was involved in the assessment, but my colleague in facilities, David McDonald, was requested to add that there's centre courtyards built into the hospital, open to the environment, with nice greenery there, and obviously it's going to attract wildlife. So they decided to put netting above that to stop any wildlife accessing it.
Was it attracting wildlife?
Yes.
I mean, from your point of view, how would you characterise the issue of pigeons on the site in the time you've been there, in terms of quantity and where they are?
I've been up on the roof of the hospital even this week, and the amount of birds that you see I would say, is normal compared to any other building.
So in terms of, it's just normal for that sort of part of Glasgow, you see that?
I think it's normal for anywhere to have that, bird population.
Well, we'll ask somebody else about pigeons inside, because I think you haven't been dealing with that.
No.
Now, the only other thing I wanted to ask you about was the issue of the taps. Now, we're gonna ask you for information about the taps maintenance, as I mentioned to you. But I want to talk about risk registers. So we've obviously seen the authorising engineer's assessment of risk, and yesterday we looked at the DMA Canyon report, and you're obviously familiar with that, its approach to risk. Are you aware of whether the water systems of the hospital, domestic water system of the hospital, are included on the Health Board's main corporate risk register as a risk?
I am aware if it is or isn't.
Well, we'll find someone who can answer that question. I think that may be everything I have for this one. Might we have a 10-minute break in case any of my colleagues have any suggestions?
We'll do that. Mr. Clarkson, Mr. McIntosh has indicated that he's asked her the questions he wants to ask. What I propose to do is just take maybe 10 minutes to find out if there's anyone feels that there's a question that hasn't been asked that should be asked. So if I could ask you to return to the witness room, and I think we've got good prospects of finishing by 1 o'clock.
Thank you.
Mr. McIntosh.
We have 5 suggested questions, which I think I might as well just ask.
Right, and you're content to?
Very happy to. They all make perfect
Right.
sense to me.
Very well. Can we invite Mr. Clarkson to return? So, Mr. Clarkson, Mr. McIntosh has perhaps 5 or thereby further questions.
Yes, so one of the strange systems is that all the other council get to tell me what I missed out, so I've got a few questions to ask you. The first is, in respect of point of use filters, you explained that they were fitted to high-risk areas,
Yes.
and that some 2 wards in the main adult hospital were no longer considered to be high-risk areas.
Because the patients have moved.
Yes, so what is the definition of a high-risk area, as you understand it, from the point of view of these filters?
You'd have to speak to a microbiologist and infection control to determine that element of it. It's where there is a potential risk of water, where somebody's got immunocompromised.
I think what are the wards that currently have point of use filters that are currently assessed as high risk?
I can't write them off the top of my head, but there is a list.
There is a list, and it's defined by microbiology.
It was in 2018. I think the water technical group and the relevant people there looked at the various wards and agreed to fit those point of
And
use
that
filters.
hasn't changed in definition.
It hasn't changed.
Well,
in
that's fine.
definition.
We'll pick it up from somebody else.
It hasn't changed in definition.
In return,
Other than those 2
wards
wards
that are no longer.
which are no longer.
Yes, of course. So we'll pick it up some other person. In respect of the blinds windows issue I asked you about, do records exist to show that any blind and window that has been repaired in a room which has a designed pressure differential for the corridor is repaired? Has it been validated? Are there records of all those validations?
I would have to check with the relevant people.
Should there be records of all those validations?
If there's a requirement to revalidate after the structure's been altered, then yes.
But you don't quite know whether it will exist in the past.
No, because it would be the ventilation team that would be looking after that aspect. It would engage with the contractor to do the revalidation.
Would it exist now? Is it something that happens now?
I'm aware that I'm not directly involved in these things, but I'm aware that when some structure's been changed in rooms,
Yes.
they'll potentially been revalidated, but we'd have to ask the EPs for mechanical systems.
Okay. Right. Now,
Small point of detail, just again, that I'm keeping up. I'm assuming when we're talking about blinds, windows, and pressurized rooms, that this arises out of a design feature at the hospital whereby if the room is on my right and the corridor is on my left, the room will have a window facing the corridor. There is then a blind, and then when I say a window, a glass pane. There's then a blind, and then another glass pane. Have I got that?
I think that because the blinds I was referring to are the ones that are to corridors in general.
and they're
areas.
internal between 2 glass panes.
Yes, an internal unit. I would have to see what those units are, but in essence, yes, it's a blind between 2 panes of glass.
And it's just that when one would naturally think of a blind, you think of blind just hanging beside the window. But in the hospital, as I understand it, the blind mechanism has a pane of glass on each side.
Yes, it does, and that's because of the infection risk of having blinds to clean.
Yeah. Thank you.
Can I ask you to go back to Bundle 27, Volume 2, page 18? Page 18, yes. So in your statement at page 78, you say, however, what was initially perceived by others to be saturated walls was in fact paint line finish, where the builder did not paint the entire wall behind the kitchen to the floor.
Mm-hmm.
On initial viewing, it showed 2 different colours. I've been asked, this looks like water staining here in this photograph. Would you agree?
It does look like water staining.
Did you take this photograph?
No.
No. You took your own photographs?
Yes.
Right. Now, when it comes to the the outer specification system in the water safety plan, we've shown you page bundle 27, volume 1, page 396, which we could get up on the screen again. Yes. Now, it's our understanding that this is the document that had its origins in a discussion between Mr. Parry and Dr. Inkster back in 2018.
Correct.
Now, I happened to look during the break, and I see that this table doesn't appear in revision C of the water safety plan.
Yes.
Could it be it's been added in as part of your improvements?
In version C, I think I made reference to WQS 17, which is the procedure which this was in.
So you're drawing material from other
Yes.
documents?
Yes, and these newer versions, rather than making references to other documents, it's bringing them all together in the one area. So you've got one
So the equivalent of this document has been around
for a good number of years.
good number of years. What systems exist to review this list?
Actually, it's been reviewed now by the National Infection Control Manual, Chapter 4, which is giving guidance
On some of these?
Yes, all of them.
But the reason I ask that is because since the list was originally created by a lead infection control doctor and a states manager together, I wonder why there wasn't a reviews internally in the hospital between the current lead infection control doctor and yourself.
I think partly because of the lack of national guidance on this, I think there wasn't a desire to change to make it any looser.
Because one of the criticisms that can be made, and this is a better criticism directed at the infection control doctor than you, but I think since it was originally a team effort, I'm going to ask you anyway. One of the criticisms is made of the way that NHS GGC in 2018-19 was reviewing specification and out of specification results is that it seems to be too reliant on the mandatory reporting microorganisms and not sufficiently critical about the other ones. Now, I don't know whether that has any validity. We'll get into that. But the same question might arise here. If there's been an exercise in constructing this list in 2018-19, wouldn't it be better to keep reviewing it in case you add more or take things off over the following years?
Yes.
But that hasn't happened.
It hasn't happened. That covers all, GMB covers all gram-negative bacteria. So that's currently at 0.
Yes.
EMS is 0. We're actually going to stop. When you say a review, we've actually inadvertently done a review as well, because there was an SPAR done by a microbiologist based on mould results.
Right.
And to stop sampling for mould and yeast other than in the tank rooms.
So you've been doing some reviewing?
Yes.
In the mould area?
Not directly reviewing as per, every year doing that, but, we have taken steps.
Right. And you'd also make the point that you can't really review lower than 0 for gram-negative
Yes,
bacteria.
and under the new guidance, under the National Infection Prevention Control Manual, Chapter 4, Legionella is going to be 0. Pseudomonas is now 0.
Right.
So that's reflected in version K.
So you've moved on. The next version no longer has Pseudomonas at under 10, it has it at 0.
Yes.
Right.
So, yes, you would see a change between the draft version and this version.
I think that may be all the questions I have.
Can I just check with the room that you have accurately
Well, this is one of the
carried out
downsides of this role, is I
carried
have
out
to
your
translate my
instructions.
colleagues' thoughts.
Are there any outstanding questions?
No.
Right. If I'm reading the room correctly, the answer to that
So-
question is no.
Mr. Clarkson, what we will do is we will send you a questionnaire about the maintenance regime for the TMTs. We'll ask you to send us the history document that you produced, and we'll add that to our documents. And you've explained its relationship to Mr. Leeper's paper, so we can see the two relate to each other. And we'll ask you to send us the current circulation list for the microbiology and specification results, and we'll add that to our note of what you said.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Clarkson, thank you very much. You've now answered all the questions you've been asked and are free to go. But before you go, can I just express my very warm thanks not simply for your attendance this morning, but for the very considerable amount of work that the inquiry has required of you. I'm very grateful. I'm first of all conscious of how much that involves, and can I say thank you for that work and for your attendance today.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
My lord, the witness this afternoon is Mr. Colin Purdon at 2 o'clock.
We'll try and sit again at 2 o'clock.